My name is Seraphina Holt, and I never imagined the fiercest battle of my life would come not on foreign soil, but across my own kitchen table. My children, the ones I raised and protected, shoved papers toward me with cold eyes and cruel words, "Sign or be disowned." In that moment, I felt the sting of betrayal deeper than any wound I carried from service. I was a mother, a widow, a veteran, and suddenly, to them, nothing but an obstacle to erase. Yet beneath their threat, I held something they didn't know, strength they had underestimated. Sign or be disowned. My children's voices cut sharper than any battlefield wound. Cold light slid across the oak table, catching faint steam from my mug. Wyoming mornings had a cruel honesty, too sharp, too bright. It was fall 2023, and the kitchen at Holt Ranch knew every scrape of my boots. I had endured worse landscapes in uniform, deserts where silence pressed like artillery. Yet nothing prepared me for betrayal across my own table. Calder set a leather folder down with a practiced motion. Maribel smiled, syrupy and deliberate. Lucan said nothing. His stare dissected me as if I were evidence on trial. Paper slid forward. Succession mandate. I read the header, refusing to touch. Calder's tone went smooth. "This keeps things simple, Mom. We'll manage the burden." Maribel's voice dropped to a coax. "You'll still be here in the caretaker's cottage. It gets the best morning Sunday. You love that view," Lucan murmured, detached, contingent on agreeable conduct and demonstrated cognitive stability. Caretaker, conduct, stability. Each word dismantled more than land. They carved at my dignity and the marrow of my name. I steadied my breath, recalling convoy orders under fire, the art of not blinking. My children mistook silence for surrender. They pushed the pen closer. I lifted my old hotel pen, clicked it once. Calder's jaw tightened. I clicked again. The sound split the air like warning shots and found joins in their confidence. I remembered fence post driven, winters survived on wood stove coffee, James sanding this rail smooth until it felt like riverstone. They thought history was paper. They thought legacy was negotiable. They were wrong. Maribel tried again. "We want what's best for the ranch." I studied her mouth, Calder's calculating eyes, Lucan's cold patience. Best was only another word for ours. I let the quiet stretch until it hummed. Their bodies leaned forward as my hand lowered. I let them wait. Then I set the pen crosswise to the signature line, a black barricade on white. "I won't sign this." Silence heavier than any barracks inspection settled. Calder exhaled, sharp. Maribel's sweetness fractured. Lucan's gaze narrowed. Numbers, taxes, hypotheticals spilled from Calder, but I no longer listened. I pushed my chair back. The scrape was final and unmistakable. I stepped onto the porch. Cold boards trembled under my hands, not from weakness but from voltage gathering. Sage lifted its dry breath toward the Sunday. Beyond the corral, a hawk etched letters on the pale blue sky. Inside, voices rose, plotting next moves, but the latch clicked behind me like a bolt. This ground, this air, they steadied me the way a hand steadies a skittish mare. I breathed as I had under body armor. Steady, measured, counting the ribs that learned weight and the spine that carried it. Betrayal had entered my house, but it had not taken command. The horizon burned gold against the mountains, and the wind combed the pasture as if to lay it smooth for what came next. Looking at the horizon, they think I'm finished. They've forgotten who I am. Legacy isn't land. Legacy is the fire you refuse to let die. The words live in my chest as I close the kitchen door on their voices and step into my study. The house settles like a coat. This room smells of paper, oil, winter dust inventory, and intent. The phrase, cognitive stability, still sizzles, an aftertaste I won't swallow. I set my palm on the desk, let the tremor pass, then reach for the safe. The key warms in my hand. The combination is muscle memory. Our wedding date, the day we signed the deed, the night James came home from deployment with sand in his teeth. The dial turns, steel jaws open with sigh. Inside lies the ledger of a life made by hand, deeds softened by years, survey maps scarred with pencil, medals nested in felt like sleeping birds. I lay each piece the way I once laid out. Convoy manifests by weight, urgency, destination. Deeds left, maps right, medals centered. They aren't mine alone. The window fogs. Beyond it, the pasture holds its breath. My enemy is not time, not blood, it is disorder. Under the maps waits an oilskin pouch, tied with cord darkened by thumb and weather. My pulse missteps. I slide the knot free and find an envelope with my name in James's blocky hand. I sit before I open it. A widow learns to sit when the ground moves. The letter is short, ink bled where rain found it once. If they come for you, remember, you are more than land. No flourish, no plea, just James, practical as a fence brace, setting a load, bearing truth. I read it twice, then a third time with fingertips on the words as if checking a pulse. I turn to the shelves. Binders, bankers' boxes, a worn appraisal. A plan wants a table and a tempo. I clear the surface except for the lamp and the letter. Then I begin. First, legal. Everything with a stamp, seal, or notarized edge deed history, water rights, assessments, contracts. These go into red visibility, urgency. Second, personal. Correspondence, bank statements, photographs, proof of life scraps families make day by day. These go into blue memory, calm. Third, counteroffensive, blank for now. I print the word across a manila folder and feel the spine answer. The insult loops back like barbed wire. Agreeable conduct, demonstrated cognitive stability. I think of young officers who mistook loud for brave and learned better. I think of the night ruck when James's knee gave and he waved me on anyway. Bodies fail, minds fail. Resolve you can choose again. Medals back into their case. Maps stacked by year, deeds in order, creases facing east where the sun will strike when I need speed. I jot a list. Injunction, audit trail, community ally, media. Iris Navarro's name lands there. So does Judge Thaddeus Crow. Osric Kane is etched in the margin of my bones. I take a last look at the letter. It steadies the air, makes a small, hard light under the lamp. James, I hear you, I say, and the study answers in the faintest echo from the vent. I tuck the letter into blue and set red. Blue, manila in a row like 3 rifles stood to. I slide a pen above them, horizontal, a sight line. Through the window, the horizon is a dark rule across the morning. I touch the manila and test the next phase on my tongue. Not defense, counterattack. No war is fought alone. I needed the old guard. James's letter still warmed the blue folder when I stepped onto the porch. The wind had shifted, sage bent toward the road as if pointing me forward. I took the phone, scrolled past numbers that no longer meant what they used to, and stopped at one I'd ignored for 4 years. I pressed call. It rang twice. The familiar gravel answered without ceremony. It's time. No question, only a pause of recognition. Where? Ranch driveway, I said. Sunset. I'll be there. I laid folders on the table, red, blue manila. By the time I heard the truck, dust made a horizon. Osric's battered green pickup parked nose, out, habit you don't unlearn. He stepped down, scanning the roofline. We didn't hug. Seraphina, he said. Osric. You called. They crossed a line, I said. I'm drawing mine. He washed his hands and took the head chair. I slid red first. He read in silence, eyes ticking at clauses. At the end, a short nod. Amateur. They thought the paperwork was the war. They thought grief would keep me compliant. Blue next. He didn't read it aloud. He bowed slightly toward James's handwriting, then set a palm on it for a beat. He tapped the manila. This one is where we win. We opened the old survey. I pointed to the Rimrock track line. Convoy route, World War II. BLM letter from 87 says the easement was never fully decommissioned. And because it wasn't, any transfer that ignores it tangles with federal interest, he said. Exactly. He tapped another corner. Water? Secured. 2 prongs, he said. 1. Injunction on any transfer pending federal review. 2. Public narrative clean factual. Reporter who won't blink. Iris Navarro, I said. Good. And a judge who remembers what law is for. I know a name. Say it. Thaddeus Crow. He smiled briefly. Sharp axe. Aye. We stood in the doorway as the sun burned to a coal. Dust settled like ash. They'll smear, stall, bait, he said. You can't react. You set tempo. I hold ground. You take ground. At the table, he rearranged. Red right, blue top, manila front. Chain of custody, backups, witnesses to your process. Sign in blue, they signed in black. It photographs clearer. We ran the timeline. The house fell to lamplight. He stacked pages to fit my grip, then measured me with the patrol look readiness, not capability. They think grief made you weak. It made you twice as dangerous. Outside, the engine clicked. Crickets sawed the yard's edges. He rested a hand on the door, the promise unspoken. Call, and I come. When the taillights vanished into the seam of road and night, I turned off the lamp. The room held the plan like a scabbard holds a blade. I picked up the manila, stood at the window, phone in my other hand. A name waited in contacts like an unpulled pin. Some wielded gavels. Crow wielded his like an axe. Frost silvered the pines as we climbed the switchbacks. Osric drove. Crow's cabin appeared without drama-gray logs. Thin smoke thread. The door was open. Judge Thaddeus Crow looked carved. Jaw quarried iron eyes. He moved aside. Barracks thrift. Stove, boot rack, books. In the center sat a heavy oak table. I set the red folder down. He planted his palms and read, letting the light find clauses. I stood with my back to the stove. Crow turned pages. He paused at pressure points. When he reached the clause that had hooked my breath in the kitchen, he stilled. His mouth made a humorless ghost of a smile, and he tapped the line with one blunt knuckle, lifting his eyes to mine. Amateurs. This alone damns them. A verdict. I swallowed the spark of satisfaction and let it burn to something steadier. Crow wrapped the table. Then Saturday. Sequence. He angled the folder. We file for a temporary restraining order immediate, then an injunction to freeze transfers and related assets. We notify the county and flag title. We request federal review to muddy jurisdiction. Every agency we copy is a mile of bureaucratic winter for them. Press? Osric said. Measured. Crow's gaze cut to me. Facts only. Veteran service once. No pleading, no rage. Can you keep your voice that clean? I can, I said. I've done worse with less. Succession mandate, he said, as if tasting a counterfeit. And their cognitive stability requirement. You'll get a Veterans Affairs evaluation clean. Meanwhile, we label their clause coercive and predatory. We spread the map. Crow traced the convoy road, then the boundary where it met the old right-of-way. Good. Even if they argue decommission by use, the record gives delay. Delay is oxygen. He boxed the water rights notations and checked them. You kept receipts. That wins wars. He set the pencil down and nodded at Osric. You told her to bring me. Day 1. We begin at 0. He opened a leather case and laid out forms with surgical calm. TRO, affidavit, dispute notice, federal review request, letters to bank and recorder. His handwriting was spare. He dictated dates. I filled blanks. Osric notarized with a thunking stamp. The morning brightened. Your children will act as a firm. We will treat them as one. We will not meet them where they hope to wound you. We drag them to ground they don't understand. Process. He pushed the TRO to me. You sign. The pen felt heavier for a heartbeat, then ordinary. I signed in blue. He slid the page into a stack like a wall. He watched my face. We don't ask for pity. We demand respect. We gathered packets red for county, yellow for bank, white for federal, blue for records. Crow bundled copies with cotton twine the old-fashioned way that convinces clerks you'll outlast them. We moved to the threshold. The frost lifted, the pines whispered. Crow's voice came behind me. They'll try noise. You answer with paper. If they push, you don't push back, you file. I nodded. The plan sat in my bones like warmth after a long watch. We stepped outside. The air cut. Truth is a weapon, but only if you dare to load it. Crow's words rode with me. Control the story before they do. The Chronicle's newsroom was a long rectangle of humming lights, walls crowded with clippings and sun-faded fronts. Ink and coffee lived here like hay and iron in a barn. Iris Navarro looked up from a battered desk, pencil behind her ear, sleeves shoved to the elbow. Tough, mid-50s, principled without announcement. Seraphina Holt, she said. I wondered when you'd stop dodging me. I was waiting to have more than a grievance. I set the red folder on her desk, the blue on my lap, the manila between us like a firing line. Now I have a case. She scanned the succession mandate, avoiding a coffee ring. Her eyes stopped at the clause. Her jaw shifted. Contingent on agreeable conduct and demonstrated cognitive stability, she read, flat as stone. They put this in writing. They wanted narrative before a hearing, I said. Crow called it predatory. Crow's on this? Her eyebrow lifted. Then you're not playing small ball. I slid over the VA service record, citations, clean audits, water rights, the old survey with its convoy scar. The 1,987 letter from the Bureau of Land Management caught the light. Easement never fully decommissioned, she said. Federal interest next to family ambition. That's not just a hook, that's scaffolding. File the injunction today, I said, but I want the first volley to be sunlight. She leaned back. Phones rang, a scanner muttered weather and minor trouble. You understand the cost, she said. They'll question your memory and your motives. I've marched longer roads, I said, and I know the terrain. Iris turned to her keyboard and began to type with the controlled speed of someone who has already framed the lead. Front page, she said. Front page? I'll run it front page. She reached for her camera, then took a quick portrait with her phone. No hero light, no romance, just a woman in a jacket, eyes steady. The truth doesn't need costume. We built the spine of the story together. Facts first, no adjectives doing evidence's work. She read back pieces of my life, 30 years in uniform, logistics command, Holt Ranch deed history, the insult clause in full, the easement, the plan to seek a TRO and federal review. She quoted Crow once, not Osric. She quoted me once. I'm not asking for pity. She paused and added the second half without asking if I meant it for print. I'm demanding respect. When the layout editor slid by, Iris intercepted him with the calm of practiced warfare. This one, she said, tapping the mock-up. Banner. The headline unfurled on the monitor like a flag. Decorated veteran pressured to sign away ranch. Below it, the subhead. Succession clause questions mental competence. Legal moves begin. The piece went live before I reached the doorframe. My phone stuttered with alerts. Emails from veterans I hadn't seen since desert nights, calls from neighbors who remembered calves at 2 a.m., and fences at dawn. The feed store owner texted a line of thumbs up that looked like a platoon. Old voices came home and set a perimeter around my name. Then the screen spit a different tone Calder. I answered on the second ring. Some doors open only once. What have you done, Mother? His voice came cold and well-fed. Do you know what you've set in motion? My firm will respond. You want a public fight? I want the truth on record, I said. You always did prefer an audience. A pause, then a blade. You're not well, and this will prove it. I passed not well months ago, I said, and kept going. He said my name like an accusation, then hung up. The air seemed suddenly cleaner. He expected you to beg, Iris said. He'll have to get used to disappointment. The Chronicle's phones began to ring in earnest. Tips, confirmations, old documentation. Public opinion gathered, grain by grain, until a weight announced itself. I signed copies of my affidavit, shook the editor's hand, and stepped into a sky the color of a decision. I powered the phone off, felt the quiet settle, and let the door swing shut behind me. My silence is my weapon now. They struck from the dark, but shadows are where soldiers learn to see. Calder's newsroom voice still clung cold, coached, certain. By morning the town had borrowed his tone. At the cafe on Main, conversations paused. Steam lifted from mugs like signal flags. I ordered coffee, took a window booth, watched. Seraphina's not right, someone murmured. Another, smart kids. A third voice, she raised this county. The gossip orbited. County email. Anonymous zoning complaint southern fence extension. Possible encroachment on right-of-way. The timing made me laugh into my coffee. I forwarded it to Crow. Predictable. Paper only. On my way out, I passed Maribel in a pale coat. She touched my arm. You should come home, Mother, she said, soft enough to carry, before it gets embarrassing. I'm already home, I said, and her smile went thin. Lucan's law office wore its money clean, glass and pale wood. The receptionist lowered her eyes to a screen. A soldier, counts weapons, and exits. By noon, the bank called. A fraud alert flared. Failed logins on the ranch subsidy account from Lucan's office block. The manager's voice was careful. I requested the report, thanked her, and drove back with the radio off. Crow answered on the first ring. I summarized the key lines. We address the complaint with measurements, he said. We answer the hack with teeth. Teeth, I said. The zoning officer met me at the southern fence with a wheel and a tight smile. We walked the line. You're within bounds, he said. The anonymous concern misunderstands the right-of-way geometry. He took photos, promised a note. Wind pawed the sage. I let it take the heat from my jaw. Back in town, Maribel's concern seeded. At the florist, 2 women whispered. Cognitive decline, one said, tasting it. It's in the article. It wasn't. Gossip needs rhythm, not accuracy. The pharmacist, a vet, gave me a discount and a look that meant stand fast. The bank report arrived at 4. Timestamps, IP ranges, failed, MFA pings. I printed 2 copies, slid one into blue, and drove the other to Crow's Gate. The lid fell like verdict. At dusk, Osric pulled up. Noise? Plenty, I said, but the paper's louder. I told him about the complaint, the office IP, and Maribel's smile. He nodded once, filed it away. They think you'll spend energy swatting flies, he said. We'll make one strike count. I didn't sleep long. At 0500, Crow's email appeared. A cease and desist to Lucan Holt, with citations, statute teeth, and a reminder of criminal exposure for unauthorized access. He CC'd the bank's counsel and the county attorney. Subject: cease immediately. I printed the letter and drove it to Lucan's office. The receptionist started her script. I set the envelope down. For Mr. Holt, I said, time sensitive. Outside, sun crested the feed mill, drawing a clean line. By noon, the town was a tuning fork. Some bent, others held still. At the hardware store, Calder's friend said I should rest. The owner slid me post caps and asked about the pasture water. Still running, he said. Still running, I said. I chose the diner. Soldiers eat where exits are clear and sightlines honest. Booths were full. A believer buried her voice in pie. A rancher said she built more fence than all 3 of them. I took the corner table and listened to the wind move through human throats. Crow's cease and desist lands on Lucan's desk. Communities pick sides. Mine shows quietly, but firmly. The gossip from yesterday no longer hovered, it had planted roots. At the Veterans Hall, the air smelled of old varnish and coffee. Folding chairs creaked under neighbors who'd once trusted me to call drills. Osric lingered at the back, scanning faces as if still counting a convoy. Abner Pike, hat crushed in his hands, rose with reluctance but spoke with weight. He told them Calder had bragged at the feed store. He'd park her mind in the cottage to make the optics cleaner. The words struck harder than any clause on paper. Heads tilted, jaws clenched. When Abner swore under God he'd repeat it in court, something in the room shifted like posts locking into soil. The mood carried across Main Street to the diner. The bell over the door gave its ordinary ring, but the silence that followed was new. The waitress set pie in front of me before I asked. For standing up, she said. I nodded, throat tight. A teacher looked up from red-inked papers. A mechanic wiped grease from his hands. Their quiet approval was louder than any gossip. Then the veterans drifted in jackets patched, steps still square. Pete Larkin tapped a spoon against his cup and reminded everyone how I'd fed a battalion in Kuwait with 3 burners and a promise. You'll lead again, he said. We've got pickups, printers, notarizing wives, and enough stubbornness to shame a mule. Laughter cracked the tension. A clipboard appeared. Names filled themselves. Teenagers signed on as runners, their eagerness shining like new brass. The diner became a command post dressed in linoleum and formica. No speeches, only tasks quietly accepted. I felt the change take root. This wasn't just my fight, it was ours. Every nod, every refill of coffee, every name scribbled on paper said so. For the first time since my children laid that document in front of me, I wasn't alone. The town was drawing its line in the dust, and it curved around me. I pressed my palm to the tabletop, steadying myself against the sudden gravity of shared resolve. My battle was no longer private, it had become a community's stand. The bell rang again. Across the street, a black SUV idled, engine rumbling like withheld thunder. Its headlights cut into the diner, bright blades across glass, across faces that had just chosen. I didn't need to see who sat behind the wheel. I knew the shape of that shadow. Calder's SUV idles outside diner, headlights glaring in. Sometimes, the dead lay stronger foundations than the living. The barn kept its own weather cool where sun failed, warm where light speared knotholes and wrote ladders of dust. I climbed to the loft with Eulalia Finch behind me, her boots careful on the rungs. She carried James's patience, the quiet kind that arrives on time without applause. "We'll start with the tack trunk," she said, tapping a cedar lid stained by bridles and raincoats. "He told me there'd be a day." She didn't look at me. The latch gave. Cedar breathed. Beneath blankets and an oilskin slicker lay a second oilskin corded tight, edges scuffed from travel. Eulalia set it down and eased the knot with a thumbnail. Paper exhaled as we opened it. The first document was a conservation easement draft with our names in block print, the land described like a vow quarters, sections, water, a defendable ridgeline. The second document weighed the same but felt heavier. A trust instrument, signatures notarized, accounts listed like sleeping iron. My heart misstepped at the figure, then steadied. 5 million, Eulalia said softly, as if near a skittish colt. James said it after the third deployment. If the kids forgot what the land was for, money would remember and refuse any other use. Heat rose to my face, though the loft was cold. I read his instructions: income for stewardship, veteran housing, soil and water. A clause braided the trust to any easement. If one stood, the other lifted. If one fell, the other hauled it up. He foresaw it, I said, not as accusation or praise, just recognition of a love that builds quietly, then waits until called. Eulalia smoothed the oilskin. We argued verbs, she said. He chose shall over may, prohibit over discourage. He wanted permanent. Dust settled like fine ash. A swallow stitched the rafters with a dark thread. Below us, a chain clinked wind, or memory. I traced boundary lines with a map-trained fingertip. The convoy road ran just outside the limit. Good. Federal interest near. Not inside leverage without a snare. We file the easement, I said, hearing crow in my mouth. We seat aboard. Veteran advocate, local conservation, one at large from the county. No bloodline seats. James suggested that. Eulalia nodded. He guessed sentiment would be used as a crowbar. I laughed once. Small, right. Then we'll honor his caution, I said. Paranoia beats faith when paper is the battlefield. Oh. We made a checklist. Crow reviews, Iris preps a sober piece. Osric runs security on filings. I call the surveyor to update meets and bounds so confusion can't be staged. Eulalia's fountain pen, the color of wet bark, wrote in a steady whisper that sounded like confidence. We packed documents by purpose. Notarize, file, hand carry to the clerk so nothing accidentally waits face down. The barn absorbed the plan like timber drinks linseed slow, thorough, becoming more itself. When the last page had a place, I set my palm on it. The weight felt earned, neither rescue nor burden, but a tool shaped to a working hand. You guarded me even after death. Eulalia's eyes shone, then steadied. He knew you'd guard everyone else, she said. This guards you. We climbed down, careful with hands, slower with feet. Outside, winter light lent the yard a white clarity. The house waited, the hills kept counsel. Somewhere a hawk rode a circle over cottonwoods. The yard felt clear. My phone buzzed. I expected a routine ping bank, county, maybe Osric's one-syllable victory. Instead, Iris's name strobed across the glass. I answered, thumb braced for weather. Iris warns, Calder's meeting county officials tomorrow. A plan untested is a weapon unfired. Night pressed Crow's cabin. Pines held breath. Inside, lanterns cast brass light over maps, filings, oilskin packets like armor. Crow's table bore it without complaint. Osric watched the window. I lined tabs until panic turned to choreography. Precision and theater, Crow said, echoing his warning. You'll need both. He nudged my elbow. Red county forward, blue trust center, white federal anchoring. Sequence wins. Sloppiness feeds their story. We rehearsed the first movement. Injunctions already stamped, ready for opening bell. Letters cued to recorder, bank, clerk identical facts, differing salutations, paper blooms. Osric read timing like a route under fire. 8:10 recorder. 8:12 bank. 8:14 county. I repeated marks until cadence lived in me. Second movement, the trust reveal. No press conference, just iris. Purpose, board, constraints, easement intent. No adjectives, Crow said. Let verbs carry weight. Establish, fund, prohibit. Third movement, the dinner. It would look like reconciliation, smell like neutral ground, and serve as record. We mapped seating like a battlefield. Osric drew lines of sight, exits, the sheriff's patrol time. If they come hot, they meet witnesses first. The diner waitress would serve, ledger memory, a phone that kept charge. They'll lash out hardest when cornered, Crow warned, pushing spectacles. Assume you're on a tail. He slid a yellow pad, the will. I breathed once and opened the draft. Sanctuary language, housing for female veterans, work tied to stewardship, soil and water covenants with penalties that bite. Board seats, veteran advocate, conservationist, county at large. Successor trustees named and vetted, no bloodline seats, no loophole to park a grievance. Osric read over my shoulder, silent until the enforcement page. Teeth, he said. Crow circled a word, underlined a date, tightening hinges so none could kick later. Shall, not may, he murmured, James's fingerprints still visible in the verbs. We drilled the dinner script. I'd give brief thanks, then the paper from my kitchen, caretaker's cottage, cognitive stability, one betrayal named and framed, legal posture, injunction active, federal review in motion. Then the turn, easement filed, $5M trust executed and funded, board announced. Say it once, slowly, without heat, Crow said. Let facts humiliate. Osric handled contingencies. If Calder provoked, I would not answer. If Maribel softened, I'd redirect to record. If Lucan argued process, Crow would step in as witness. If anyone crossed into crime, Osric would end it. 2 deputies would be parked outside, bored. We practiced until the lines sounded like mine. I stacked pages, injunctions, easement, trust, will, sheriff's clock. Lanterns hissed, guttered, steadied, paper warmed under my wrists. Crow set a notary seal by my right hand. No second thoughts, he said, not unkindly. You had them already. Now you have mission. Ugh. My signature learned steadiness in deserts, wardrooms, corridors. It was steady now. I initialed margins, Crow anchored, then set my name where it would not be moved. Pages settled like kit, not burden, but readiness taking shape. This is my battlefield now. Silence took inventory. Osric exhaled like a bolt returning to battery. Crow blotted ink like saving a pulse. Outside, wind moved through trees. The cabin held. We ran the sequence without speaking, checking marks, envelopes, chain. When nothing else asked to be refined, Crow capped his pen, closed the ledger, looked like a commander whose briefing is over, and only execution remains. Then bait the trap, invite them home. Defeat tastes sweetest when it's mistaken for surrender. I made the first call with the steadiness of a soldier delivering orders. Calder, I said, let's settle as family. Friday night, the ranch. No lawyers. He exhaled a laugh that carried triumph. Finally, we'll make it simple, Mom. I let the word echo and fixed the time at 7. Maribel answered on the second ring, syrupy sweet. Oh, Mother, yes. It's time we healed. I caught the clink of glass, a toast poured early. Wear something warm, I replied. She promised to bring a ribboned bottle, as if wine could sanctify betrayal. Lucan did not pick up. Instead, a text arrived. Glad you're ready to be reasonable, we'll keep it cordial. Cordial, reasonable words sharpened to hide steel. I wrote back only, Friday, 7. Oh. By noon, Iris had the notice she needed for her Chronicle teaser. By mid-afternoon, Crow's injunction paperwork sat primed on a deputy's desk. By 4, Osric was in my kitchen, as unremarkable as a shadow. He carried nothing visible and therefore everything I required. I turned to the house. Cold November air washed the dining room before I shut the windows. I lifted James's heavy pot, browned beef with onion, added thyme in the palm-high way he used to. Carrots, potatoes, and red wine deepened the stew until memory itself perfumed the air. Bread warmed in the oven. The home they thought broken beat like a heart. From a drawer, I pulled heirloom china, polished the thin blue bands until they glowed. My mother's silver followed, weighty enough to remind any hand that lifted it of permanence. The dining room rarely looked formal, but tonight it bore treaty clothes. Frost pressed the windows while lamplight gathered its courage. I called each child once more, giving nothing away. 7. No papers tonight, just family. Calder promised swiftness. Maribel whispered about calm, and Lucan sent a clipped thumbs up, followed by a stray message clearly meant for his siblings. She'll sign. Smile. I let it sit in my notifications, a preview of overconfidence. Osric waited at the breakfast nook, boots steady, eyes calm. We confirmed the positions. My chair against the wall, theirs facing the window. Sideboard cleared for documents that would appear only when I chose. Deputies idled in town, ready at the hour Crow had chosen. Don't oversell the peace, Osric murmured. Let them oversell victory. I nodded, adjusting the plate's ridge until my pulse steadied. The stew simmered on schedule, disciplined as any company I had led. Dusk descended. I lit the chandelier, modest but steady. A white cloth softened the table, sound dampened to a hush. I set 3 wine glasses and 1 water glass, reminders of boundaries no one else understood. Headlights cut across the windows, tires crunched familiar gravel. The bell rang as though the house itself had been waiting for them. I opened the door, letting the cold judge us first. Maribel entered with perfume sharp as accusation, bottle extended like an olive branch. Calder strode in broad and smug. Lucan followed, courtroom chill in tow. We exchanged shallow greetings, cheeks brushed without warmth. In the dining room, they tested the space. Maribel praised the china as though it excused cruelty. Calder adjusted his cufflink, calculating already. Lucan prowled the sideboard, missing the gap where certainty should have warned him. He leaned close to his siblings and smirked. She'll sign tonight. Watch. I ladled stew, steam wreathing their faces, honest despite themselves. We ate with the rhythm of families pretending. I asked about their drives, their offices, nothing edged. They relaxed. Certain surrender had time's fragrance. I cleared the plates slowly, one by one, letting silence coil. In the hallway mirror, silver in my hair gleamed like steel. I smoothed it back, studied the woman looking out, the soldier they had misjudged, and allowed the words to rise with certainty. You'll never see it coming. Some fortresses stand on stone. Mine stood on signatures. Timing is everything, Crow had said, and the clock agreed. Morning cut a blade of light across the records office. Dust drifted. I stepped to the counter with folders squared. The clerk hair in a practical knot, patience earned from 100 fence disputes, looked up like I'd made an appointment. Recording? She asked. 2, I said. An easement and a trust, linked. The clerk slid a tray closer and straightened a placard. Recording. Osric stood at my shoulder, silent enough to be mistaken for furniture, except furniture doesn't keep time. A single-page checklist rested in his hand. We drilled it into muscle. He didn't read it. He didn't need to. We started with the conservation easement. I slid the oilskin free, laid the document flat, metes and bounds, a legal description tight enough to make liars hesitate. The clerk checked parcel numbers, cross-references, notarizations, the supporting affidavit, the board resolution from a foundation whose articles filed minutes earlier in another hallway. Bureaucracy has choreography. We kept the beat, every step set. Source of authority? She asked, already knowing. I pointed. Board vote, trust instrument, the sanctuary clause threading through both. A stapler snapped crisply. A printer complained, then made peace. Someone paid a fine. The world kept happening. None of it mattered like ink drying under my hand. Add notice to preserve viewshed integrity, riparian buffers, historical approach roads, she said. Yes, I answered, and we shared the small smile of professionals on the bridge between language and use. She stamped the first page received and cued it for imaging. The thunk vibrated through my elbows. Next. The trust weighed the same but felt heavier, 5 million braided to purpose. Veterans housing, soil, water, long repairs. I passed the schedule of accounts, the trustees' consents, the clause that married trust to easement. If one stood, the other stood. If one fell, the other dragged it up. The clerk's eyes warmed a fraction. People in such offices learn to cherish structures that outlast appetite. "Everything's clean," she said, tapping efficiently. "Imaging is short. I'll walk them through." At the scanner, she aligned corners, fed pages, watched the monitor bloom. A clock clicked. Fluorescence hummed. She returned with the very calm of someone who files storms. "Ready to record." Osric leaned. "A fraction." I nodded. She raised the brass seal, set the first page, and lowered firm judgment. The embossed bit paper with a dry cry. Again and again, careful hands making law audible. The impression lifted like an old country rising from fog. My father taught me to trust hammers and pliers. Crow taught me to trust verbs. This woman taught me to trust stamps. "They've already lost," Osric said from another century. "They just don't know it yet." I signed the ledger where familiar names had signed for deeds and brands. The clerk slid copies into a sleeve that made the crackle of plastic sound ceremonial. She read book and page numbers aloud the way a fortress declares itself without trumpets, coordinates. "Index confirms cross-links to the trust and easement," the clerk added, satisfied. Outside, sun pushed across the steps, melting frost into glints. I stood for 5 and let the day settle. The ranch had a skeleton of statute. The money had orders and would keep them. The board would convene and argue. I felt light and anchored at once, as if the land leaned back into its true shape and took me along. We walked to the truck. I texted Crow the single word we'd agreed on. "Recorded." He replied with 3 dots, as if driving a nail. "Stamp of county seal irrevocable." They expected surrender. I served them a verdict. Golden lamplight glazed the dining room, soft against the polished china, a warmth that made the air deceptive. James's favorite stew simmered in the tureen, ladled into bowls already waiting. I had set the table deliberately. Heirloom china, crystal glasses, silver so clean it mirrored. Every detail whispered tradition, safety, continuity. That was the first illusion. We ate in brittle silence. Spoons stirred, chairs creaked, the mantel clock ticked as though measuring not time but patience. Calder's shoulders flexed with practiced authority. Maribel smiled too sweetly, her words sharpened before they even reached her lips. Lucan's eyes kept straying toward my folders stacked neatly by the sideboard. He thought they contained surrender. He was the first to drop the mask. Spoon set down, voice clipped, smug. "Shall we get to it? Tonight you sign. The cottage will be yours if you behave. It's more than generous." His gaze sliced toward me, mocking the woman who had raised him. Maribel leaned in, hands folded as if in prayer. "It's love, Mother. Legacy needs order. You'll have your mornings by the window. Leave the weight to us." She spoke softly, but her words hid steel. Calder backed her with a single nod, silent judgment. I had seen juries moved the same way. I set my napkin down. The quiet was deliberate, a weapon sharpened by waiting. Osric, seated a step back, did not speak. His silence was ballast. I rose, crossed to the sideboard, lifted the first folder, and slid it across the polished surface toward Lucan. "You wanted a signature," I said. "Here it is." The paper opened under lamplight. "Filed this morning. A conservation easement. Permanent. Every acre locked. Every boundary sealed. You cannot touch it." Their faces shifted together, shock, fury, disbelief. Calder surged forward, veins taut. Maribel's laugh rang false, brittle, too high. Lucan scanned the page, color draining, eyes moving faster as if speed could undo permanence. "This isn't binding. We can appeal. Amendments." "You can't amend stone," I said. "The seal is real. The county file will not vanish because you wish it so." My hand rested on the document, calm, claiming more than land, claiming the battlefield itself. They roared, voices tripping over each other. Calder shouted about inheritance. Maribel accused me of cruelty. Lucan spat words about senility and manipulation. I waited, letting their storm collapse under its own weight. Then I reached for the second folder. But not yet. First I pulled from the easement packet the clause they had thought invisible. I read it aloud, each word etched clear. "Caretaker's cottage, contingent on agreeable conduct and cognitive stability." My tone cut. "Caretaker's cottage? Agreeable conduct? Let me show you stability." Silence struck harder than noise. Their own words burned between us. I laid down the proof. Bank reports of Lucan's attempt at subsidy fraud, the zoning complaint traced to Maribel's household, Abner Pike's testimony overhearing Calder's scheme. Nails in a coffin they had built themselves. Osric's eyes met mine approval without sound. The humiliation was public enough. Their own dining room, their own heirloom table, their own mother's steady voice making them smaller. Calder's face reddened, his fists braced white against the table. "You'll regret this," Maribel whispered, her tone cracked. Lucan leaned back, cornered animal cloaked in arrogance. "This is retaliation. A court will see it." "A court will see truth," I replied. "And the truth doesn't tremble." I gathered the first folder, set it aside, then placed the second in the table's center. The air thickened. Golden lamplight turned cruel in its honesty. They leaned forward, each breath a question they didn't dare ask. "And this, my dear children, ends it all. Justice doesn't roar, it arrives like a knock at the door." The dining room held its breath. Golden lamplight skimmed the china. The stew had cooled to a skin, as if the evening itself had decided to stop indulging appetite. My second folder lay in the center like a sealed horizon. The mantel clock, faithful and officious, lifted its hands toward 8. I opened the folder and let the papers breathe. "You asked for structure," I said. "Here is structure." I slipped out the new will, the trust addenda, the board consents pages that fit together with the calm of a puzzle finally finished. "Effective upon recording," I continued, "the $5 million trust is placed in perpetuity for Holt Sanctuary housing, training, and transition grants for women veterans. The board holds authority. There are no bloodline seats." Maribel's smile collapsed at the edges. "Mother, no, this is madness. You're grieving. They'll say a lawyer preyed on you." "Crow drafted what James and I began," I said. The paper waited for its day. Today is that day. Lucan leaned in, hunted eyes bright. "You won't get this through probate uncontested. Unconscionability, undue influence, incapacity, pick your poison." "Capacity?" I let the word roll, then set it down sharp. "You examined mine at dinner. You may stand by your workmanship." I tapped their own phrase on the page they'd brought to my kitchen. Cognitive stability. The text seemed to shrink under the lamplight. Calder's voice pitched low, a bar's worth of threat. "End this spectacle and sign the succession mandate. We'll forgive the headline stunt and let the county filing expire in peace." "You mistake quiet for weakness," I said. "Quiet is discipline." I held up the will so that the light found the notary seal. "This instrument revokes prior dispositions. It funds Holt Sanctuary. It excludes you 3 by name." Maribel's wineglass rang against the table. "Exclude? Your children?" "After everything, define everything," I said, and slid across the bank's fraud notice bearing Lucan's failed login attempt. "Is it this?" I placed the county's trace of the zoning complaint near her hand. "Or this." Then Abner Pike's statement, in simple handwriting that read like fence posts. Plain, upright, sufficient. "He heard what you planned at the feed store." Lucan's patience snapped. "You're retaliating because we tried to help," he hissed. "A judge will." The clock struck 8. Each note was measured, polite, and absolute. On the final chime, a firm rap shook the doorframe 3 knocks with the authority of a hallway you don't argue with. Osric's chair whispered against the floorboards as he rose, then stopped. I was already moving. At the threshold stood Sheriff Larkin, hat in hand, Winter at his shoulders. He nodded to me, to Osric, then passed us to the table where my children sat like a jury that had lost its summons. "Evening, Miss Holt," he said. "Judge Crow's filings were received and processed. I'm here to serve temporary restraining orders pending hearing. Parties named Calder Holt, Maribel Holt, Vance, and Lucan Holt." Maribel blinked hard, then performed a failure of grace. "Sheriff, this is family business private." He opened the folder he carried, finding not a threat but a ritual. "Ma'am, these are orders of the court. They prohibit trespass and contact, authorize removal from the property, and set a hearing date. Signatures right here." He handed me my copy first. The pages felt like winter wood, solid, seasoned, built to bear weight. "You can't be serious," Calder said, half to the badge, half to the air. "You're ejecting heirs from their home." "From their mother's home," Larkin corrected not unkindly, "by court order until the dispute is resolved." "Oh." Lucan tried for a smile that had sold juries worse stories. "There must be some misunderstanding. We'll handle this with counsel tomorrow." "Counsel can meet you at the county lot," Larkin said. He gestured to the entryway like a gentleman ushering guests from a mistaken party. A deputy stepped forward from the porch, a quiet second syllable to the sheriff's sentence. Maribel stood, fingers worrying the ribbon at her bottle's throat until it came away like a snapped vein. "Mother, please," she whispered, "don't humiliate us. We can talk." "You did your talking," I said. "You brought it to my kitchen and called it care. I signed for receipt, the sheriff countersigned, a tidy checkmark that felt older than any of us." "Calder Holt," Larkin called gently. "You're served." The paper touched his palm. He didn't look down. "Maribel Holt, Vance, you're served." Her hand shook. "Lucan Holt, you're served." He held it as if paper might bruise. "Time to go," Larkin said. Chairs rasped. Coats were claimed with jerks that pretended at control. The house watched with its thousand small eyes, knobs, frames, the gleam on the banister worn by my husband's hand. Osric stood near the door, not blocking, not moving, making space into a boundary. Calder paused by the sideboard and glanced at the folders he hadn't earned the right to touch. He lowered his hand. On the threshold, Winter stepped closer, interested. Maribel's perfume had turned thin. Lucan's jaw worked at an argument no longer invited. I felt no triumph, only the correctness of a weight properly lifted. I walked them to the porch because mercy has manners. Gravel accepted their steps the way old ground does without applause. The deputies waited, engines ticking little metronomes. Back in the doorway, I looked at my table, at the vacant chairs, at the lamplight that had not flickered through any of it. The house exhaled. A mother might forgive, but a soldier completes the mission. Calder swung around, eyes bright with heat that refused instruction. "You'll regret this, Mother. Inheritance built on greed crumbles faster than dust." The words lingered in my head as I stared out over the ranch fields, frost tightening around the fences. My children had walked away under the sheriff's order, but exile was never the end of a war. It was only the beginning of their unraveling. News traveled quickly through Holt County. By Monday, Calder's polished smile in the city was cracking. His investors, once lured by the promise of Holt Ranch folded into development projects, now read the headlines Iris Navarro kept alive. "Decorated veteran secures land trust. Money doesn't argue with permanence." The conservation filing was public record, stamped and sealed. By the end of the week, Calder's firm began hemorrhaging clients. Partners whispered about mismanagement, and when one brave associate leaked his attempt to divert ranch-linked funds, the collapse quickened. I didn't even have to lift a finger. Calder had built his empire on the assumption of inheritance, and when it vanished, so did the empire. Maribel tried to spin herself as victim. The charities she sat on, names polished in brochures and gala dinners, now faced questions. Where had the donations gone? Why were funds missing from accounts meant for widows and orphans? A quiet audit turned into a loud investigation. Her board voted to suspend her. The same socialites who once clinked glasses at her side now crossed streets to avoid her gaze. For all her sweet tones and velvet reassurances, her fall was harder than Calder's. Society loves to adore, but it delights even more in discarding idols. And Lucan, my quiet, watchful son, slipped away in silence. His apartment emptied in a single night. Neighbors said he carried nothing but 2 duffels and a box. Days later, a letter arrived, the envelope thin but heavy in meaning. His handwriting was careful, as if each word carried weight he had never spoken aloud. "Mother, I never fought Calder because I feared him. I never fought Maribel because I thought she was sharper. But the truth is I feared myself more. I watched, I followed, I enabled, and I became the shadow that let them thrive. I resented Calder's dominance, but I hid behind it. I don't expect forgiveness. I only want you to know I saw you stand where I could not. I am not strong. Maybe distance will make me less weak." I folded the paper slowly, the silence in the room answering for him. "Silence is an answer too," I murmured, sliding the letter back into its envelope. Of all 3, Lucan's voice pierced deepest not because it accused, but because it confessed. Regret has its own kind of honesty. Outside, the winter wind moved across the pastures, bending the grass like a slow tide. The house was quiet, but not hollow. Files were locked, plans secured, signatures already shaping the sanctuary that James and I had dreamed of. My children's downfall was not my triumph, it was the consequence of their choices. I had chosen differently, and the land bore witness. The knock came just as the sun dipped behind the ridge, 3 sharp raps that echoed through the hall. I opened the door to find Iris Navarro, notebook in hand, eyes burning with questions. "Ready to tell the rest of the story?" she asked. The chill of night slipped past her into the room. I stepped aside, letting her in. The fight wasn't over, not yet. Legacy isn't what you leave behind for blood. It's what you build for the scarred. Spring rinsed the high country clean, snow pulled back to the ridges, pastures woke in disciplined green. We finished the caretaker's cottage paint cured, curtains hung, boards tight under boots with miles left in them. The porch that once held my exile quietly waited for first arrivals. The town came with folding chairs. Iris Navarro stood near the steps, sleeves rolled, notebook ready. She promised beginnings. The sanctuary board clustered by the ribbon eulalia with seedling trays, Abner with his pocket knife, Crow at the edge like a granite witness, Osric steady. A bell tried punctual. The wind smelled of cedar and hay. I thought of James's letter. If they come for you, remember you are more than land. A map is honest once it's walked. The ranch was our map. The sanctuary would be theirs. We cut the ribbon without speeches because fabric parting said enough. Applause lifted, then settled into coffee and chatter. Iris gathered sentences like heirlooms. A trio tuned guitars on a flatbed. The wind kept time. They came in 2s and 3s, a welder with wrist scars, a medic whose hands closed what the world keeps tearing, a logistics sergeant whose ledger outlived a colonel's bluff. Young, not new, their eyes measured doors and time. We showed cabins, small, sound, stubborn. Each door had a hook and letter holder. Mail can be a lifeline. The mess smelled of yeast, the workshop of oil and possibility. The approach road remembered history. The easement kept freedom honest. In the cottage, sunlight tested floorboards and stayed. 2 women set down duffels, traded a glance. "Are you here too?" and laughed. We sat on the porch and let boards teach our spines to rest. Iris asked for names, accepted first names, or none. Survival favors caution. Stories found order. A dust storm and a locked door. A command allergic to injury. Silence used like a leash. Then counterweights. A grandmother's tea. A dog rescued on a tarmac. A bunker joke that made 3 a tribe. I offered no advice, just refills. Asked for rules. I said, "No one gets to be less than they are." The medic nodded, as if she'd stitched that sentence before. "Say something for the record," Iris said. I looked at cabins, mended fence, sky without pretense. "Paper built this place," I said, "but hands will keep it. When hands falter, other hands lift." Plain words, I trusted them. Afternoon eased. Eulalia planted sage, yarrow, comfrey, mint plants that mend. Abner fixed a gate latch. Crow carried chairs. Osric taught a private to swing a hammer without letting it swing her. As shadows lengthened, a young veteran sat beside me, boots square. She traced the rail's grain. "They told us the hardest fight is after war." "Then I've been fighting the right war all along." The reply arrived like breath. We watched women move from hall to pasture, claiming without asking permission. The land, relieved of inheritance and extraction, breathed deep. A hawk wrote a verdict above the north field. The kettle clicked promises kept. Evening drew the town home. Iris closed her notebook and stood in the doorway of the cottage, once my exile, now the first light left on. "You'll tell me when the seedlings take?" "You'll see it," I said. Some roots announced themselves. Dusk gathered, unafraid. I walked to the rise where James and I once perched with the map between us. I listened for the old noise that once passed for proof, heard instead a steadier choir, a screen door finding its latch, a laugh that didn't check the room, a horse nickering at those who belonged. The sun laid its last gold along cabins, cottage, and the road that would bring others. I let the day finish me like a knot pulled true and turned toward the lights. Justice may come late, but it comes to stay. Oh. I stood through fire to carve out peace, but the truth is I could never have done it alone. Now I ask you, stand with me. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if my fight resonates with you, if my choices felt just. Every voice adds weight to justice. Every word of support strengthens the walls of this sanctuary. If you believe betrayal can be turned into dignity, lift me with your words. Support me as I continue this journey, because stories like mine don't end at the last page, they live in community.